Hello everyone.
Hello.
My name is Adrian and I work for Collabora. We're an open source focused consultancy. So our role is to do upstream first approaches and help our customers to adopt like upstream first philosophies and adopt their developments in that direction. We've been doing that for 20 years already. So we've been founded in 2005. I'm a Git newbie, so this is actually my first Git contribution, so please be gentle with me. And I'm giving a quick introduction to two patch series I'm working on. So first of all, a big thank you to everyone who contributed to this patch series. I'm not doing everything from scratch here. I'm building upon others' work, which have been working on this topic for at least 2018. So these are quite long-running topics and partly have already landed in the Git repository. I just want to finish this work, right? So basically I'm just completing what others already started, designed, and worked upon. So big thank you to everybody. Okay, the first topic, encoding Git submodules names. I actually posted version 1 of this series, so you have a link there. You also have a link to the slides at the end. And I did manage to break Windows and Mac builds with that patch series, so sorry about that. I'll fix that in version 2. Okay, so why do this? So this came as a surprise to me. If you run those two commands, one after another, to add two submodules with name foo and foo/bar, you'll get an error. And that's unexpected, right? So why does that happen? Git uses a file backend, which Patrick also mentioned, which stores in the file system under the modules directory, the Git directories, the Git repositories, using the plain name, right? So when you add two submodules named foo and bar, they will conflict in the file system because they will be nested, right? So that's the basic problem we're trying to solve. Now, there are corner cases here, because conflicts also happen in case-insensitive file systems. So if you have something like foobar and foobar with caps, then you will get a conflict. Or you might have problems with reserved file names, something Patrick also touched upon. So my patch also tries to fix that, right? And likely there are even more corner cases than those. And you know, the most dangerous things are the unknown unknowns which you have. So if you have any other like corner cases like this, please raise them up and I'll address them in my series. So much of this work is to identify all the corner cases. So the general solution is to somehow encode those file names so they don't conflict, right? Instead of using the plain name, you encode or hash it. So it's pretty simple. Now, there's a unified API internally, which was added in 2021. So all the code paths which need to work with submodules, they get the names using that function, which is very nice. I found just one exception which hard-coded like that module's name using the plain name, and I fixed that in my patch series. The idea is that that function, if we just modify that function to encode the name, then everybody will use the new names and the new paths. So that unified API is already landed and it's good. Now, we have to make a big decision here. What do we use for the encoding, right? We can use encoding, we can use hashing. Encoding can be reversed. Hashing is one way. If you hash the names, you lose the human readability part of the names. We could even do a combination, like use hash and the name. That's something which I have not in my patch series, but it can be added. So what I did in my version 1 is I used URL encoding, right? But URL encoding is well known, but it's not enough. URL encoding doesn't handle the case-insensitive part. So I had to extend a bit URL encoding. Backwards compatibility. We have to be careful not to break existing modules because this is the risk with this series, right? So this is why we decided to split the namespace of submodules, create a new directory alongside the modules directory. We have submodules which store the encoded names, right? So this is the current design. And any new submodule after landing this series will be created under the submodules path. And that's how you keep them separated. You want to avoid situations like a pre-existing module already has like escaping characters from the encoding which you use. And the idea is for the legacy modules to work as before. Okay. There are other corner cases. It's all about the corner cases. So we're adding an ability to override the encoding via configs. So other projects don't need to exactly match the encoding which we add to Git. And users can also change the encoding for specific modules. And this is it basically for this patch series. Please go ahead and review it, give feedback to it, and yeah, I hope to have it landed. Especially on the encoding part, and if you have any other corner cases which we might break. So that's the important thing here. Okay, going on to the next topic, which is big and complex, and I like to call it like a big, hairy, audacious goal. This is from a Build to Last book. So it's about modernizing Git hooks, right? We want to add these new features to like Git hooks. We want to have a unified internal API for hooks, which already exists and has landed. It's hook.h and .c in Git. We want to migrate all the hooks to the new API and also have some nice user interfaces for the hooks, like a git hooks run command or a git hooks list command, right? So you can work nicely with hooks, even just from your shell, right, from your command line. And we want to run hooks in parallel where it's possible. Not all hooks can be parallelized, but some of them can be parallelized. So it makes sense to be able to run them in parallel. And also it would be nice to specify hooks via configs. So in the config file, you can say this event will have these commands which want to run. So you can have multiple hooks for an event, or like you can even have a hooks trace categories, and yeah, so this is like the big goal, right? Now, this has been long running. There was a thread with over 500 messages with many patches, which I went through, and my head was spinning at the time, but I managed to understand everything there. So, or almost everything. And we have the base hook API, which is landed. So that was nice. That API is already parallel by design. So hooks are being run sequentially right now because we pass a parameter with jobs equals 1 that makes all the hooks run sequentially. But the idea is that if we want to run any hook in parallel, we just increase the number of jobs. If you pass jobs equals 2 or 5 or 10, then we get parallelism. That's the idea with this API design. There are still some hooks to convert. These are the last outliers. You have a list there. And what blocks those is that we need some API extension for input-output. If we want to run them in parallel, we need to send input via the standard input to the hooks, and we need to collect their output. And as many of you know, when running processes in parallel, doing input and output with them is hard because you might have races. The output might be mangled between the processes which run in parallel. So you need to collate it. You need to organize the output and print it nicely so you know which hook had which output. So that API is missing, and that will be something which I plan to add. Now, we can do a shortcut. We can just skip the parallelism, just convert the hooks and do it sequentially anyway. This will allow us to jump directly to adding the configure feature, the config hooks feature. So we can specify hooks via config and not have parallelism. The idea is that we will just add the parallelism later to it. You know, there's always this danger of like we'll do it later, right? We'll fix it later. And especially when we're talking about adding APIs or interfaces later, it's a bit risky because like might take a long time, or we might break the existing implementation. So yeah, I would like to do it now, but that's also an option, right? Regarding those APIs, I've seen at least 3 different ways to do it. The simplest way, which Junio suggested, was to just put the data in a file and just pass that file as standard input to the hooks, and then the hooks will just read the file, and that would be like the simplest thing to do. There is already an API to specify which file to use as standard input for the hooks. So at least 3 ways to do it. We'll see, like, when reviewing the patch series, which one will be better. I'll do a summary of each of them. Okay, and another important decision we need to make here is, how do we do parallelism? Do we have it on by default, off by default? As I mentioned, the current default is serial execution, so with jobs equals 1, and we could continue doing that. We could enable parallelism for good, known safe hooks, right? Some hooks might be parallel by design. And there's also this problem that the hooks can contain arbitrary user code. So we don't know what data races they might have, and we might end up breaking some existing hooks by enabling parallelism. So maybe we should just keep it serialized by default and have parallelism as an opt-in. So anybody who wants to run their hooks in parallel, they can just enable the config to do so, because the user should know what's in their hooks, right? We don't know exactly what's in each hook. Now, I'm not sure how much of a problem this really is, but yeah, it needs like careful review. We could just, like, for the hooks which we consider to be safe, which we think would be safe to run in parallel, we could just flip the switch and enable that and see if anybody complains or if it actually breaks. So we could also try that approach. Okay, now we need to be careful with this because there's a non-zero chance of breaking stuff, right? So both these patches can break like existing modules or existing hooks. And yes, we can change internal APIs more easily, but once users start depending on the new modules encoding or the new configs, then it will be much harder to change them. And we might end up supporting something which it's not like the best thing, and we might want to change it later. So yeah, we have to be careful with these two patch series. So my message is to please review and test this stuff. So this was my presentation. Thank you very much. And now